So my last plug for using account books to find out things you might not otherwise find is that account books, again, because money is involved, it's one of the places where things get written down that are never otherwise going to get written down. And a big one for that, for coastal Maine, is fishermen, especially not fishermen who are owning large vessels out on multi-month voyages that have to get financed, but fishermen, inshore fishermen, herring fishermen, clammers, that might use their own boats, that use their own material, that aren't operating in debt, but are very active along the coasts. They don't have to write things down, and they often don't. So where we find records of them are where we find records of salt. Salt was imported to Maine, usually from Europe or the West Indies. It was imported, it had to go through the customs house, and it had to be bought and sold. So actually some of our biggest collections related to fisheries are part of the US Customs House records that we have here. Because salt was coming in, it was being imported by fishing firms, and it was being taken out of customs custody by fishing firms. And we can see those records. This here is another wonderful little book that we found. See, it's very tiny, and it's titled Clams and Pogies. So they're not high on the hierarchy of things you fish for, but very common in the coast of Maine. And it's from a firm in Brooklyn that's selling salt. And here we have all of the names of the fishermen in Brooklyn who are buying salt, which is nice. We don't normally get to see these guys in the historical record, especially because once you come around to 1871, notice that most of these guys are named things like Seth and David, but here's somebody by the name of Martha Gray, and she shows up again. Martha Gray is buying a bushel and 3/8 of salt. So this was a point where Sipperley and I got to say, what's going on here? Who is Martha Gray? And it turns out she was a fisherman. She was a clammer. She was a single woman. She was living with her family. Her father died in 1869. And in the 1870 census, she went and listed her occupation as a clammer. And here she is a year later, evidently, certainly keeping up with the men in the area, supporting herself by fisheries. And it's nothing that get written down. That's the only record we have of her. But we know, in a sense, that women were active in the fisheries in a way that we might not otherwise know, simply because she had to buy salt. So.